Hey all, today I just want to do a quick analog feedback loop using Eurorack. I don't do a lot of videos talking about Eurorack because I believe the whole point of a modular system is to design your own synthesizer. And I don't want any of my videos to be, hey, you have to buy these things to accomplish what you want to accomplish. Once again, what I'm going to do today, you can do in Pure Data, you can do in Kima, you can do in Reactor, you can do in pretty much anything. But let me set up something with my little synth here. And again, every single module that I'm using here can be replaced by another generic one that does the same thing. So just as a place to start, here's a sine wave, right? We're actually going to do feedback patching, so there's going to be no input, but just to prove that this is a sine wave. Boop, right? Okay, so that sine wave, though, I don't want to use as a sine wave. I want to use that as part of my ring modulation. So by doing this is a multiplication, same thing as ring modulation. By doing this, I've changed that sine wave from a generator into a modifier. So just to prove that, I'll plug this in. Maybe there'll be a little bit of bleed in there. If we listen carefully, I think maybe we can hear a quiet sine wave in there. But since, again, this is multiplication, since you're multiplying something by 0, the product should be 0. Once again, we're in the analog world, so it's not exactly right. Okay, so what are we going to multiply by this sine wave? Okay, well, let's take the output of this spring reverb and multiply by that. Okay, nothing's going into that spring reverb, so we get a whole lot of nothing. But if I were to set up a feedback loop, so here's my stackable cable, again, listening to the out of the ring modulation, and then the input going into that spring reverb. It got very loud, very fast. Turn down that drive. We want to find a good level here that is not blowing up at. Okay. And now I can change. Let's get a little bit more here. Now the ring modulation by changing the pitch of that oscillator. I can change my sound. Okay, neat. If you watch my video on digital feedback loops, you know that this is, ring modulation in that process is something that's adding more frequencies, right? Ring modulation splits something into 2 frequencies. So we could, this is a Benjamin, but I'm not going to use any parts of the Benjamin except I'm just going to use it as a filter. So I'm going to use a low pass filter. Again, we're listening to the output of the low pass filter, which is also going to the spring reverb. We're going to take the output of the ring modulator into that low pass filter. Again, all those controls off. Add a little bit of resonance. Look for a good spot. Finding our balance, feedback all about balance. I have 2 frequencies here. The frequency of the filter and the frequency of the ring modulation. Okay, that's kind of hard to control. What I want to do now is I'm going to add this, which is saturation. It prevents it from blowing up. Compressor would do the same idea as this, but let's think about this. Let's take the output of that filter, run into that, and that might make it a slightly easier thing to control for us. So I'm just messing with the filter cutoff, its resonance, and then the frequency of the oscillator. Okay, that sounds pretty great. Now, let's add a little bit of interest. So this is just a very, very slow LFO, basically. Use that to adjust, without me touching with my hand, adjust the frequency of that ring modulation. And also different output, different motion. Also send that to the filter and adjusting the cutoff frequency of that. Pretty great. So here's what we've ended up with. Our feedback loop starts with a spring reverb. The spring reverb, we just listening to the tank that gets ring modulated by this sine wave here. This sine wave is being modulated. And then the ring modulated output of that goes into a low pass filter, which is being modulated by a different output from that. And then the output of that low pass filter goes into our saturation, into our compressor, whatever we want to call it. And then we listen to that and it goes back into that spring reverb. Again, as you heard, this feedback loop works with several of these components not there. I find ring modulation is really great for the feedback loops, ring modulation, and then some sort of filter to tame it. I think a lot of people are talking about fixed filter banks for their feedback loops. Excellent too. It is nice to have this compressor or saturation or whatever to keep it tame. You heard how quickly I was clipping without that, so it's nice to get under control. And then something time-based, whether it's a delay or a reverb, to get that feedback loop doing something dynamic over time. All right, let's leave it there for today. I'll see you next time.